Aloha! Welcome to Return on Wellness, a web series brought to you by Caesars Entertainment.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Return on Wellness brought to you by Caesars Entertainment. You may not think Caesars Entertainment when you think wellness, but they actually have a wellness menu available for meeting planners in 15 properties in 3 different cities. That's Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and Reno Tahoe, to help make your meetings even more effective by implementing wellness. That wellness menu takes all the guesswork out of it. It makes your life much easier. And for more details, you can scan the QR code at the end of the episode. Without any further ado, I would like to welcome our guest today. We have Jessie Gibson. I said like Debbie Gibson, and she said, I'm sorry, who's that? She has a number of letters after her name, MS, RD, LD. Let's get into it. We're going to be talking about all things food and how it impacts people's ability to pay attention and focus at meetings, events, and conferences. So without any further ado, Jessie,
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's start off with what all those letters mean. You have your master's, obviously.
Yeah, master's in science.
Master's in science. Registered dietitian is the RD.
That's my national licensure, so that credits me to be a dietitian in the United States.
Okay.
But Texas requires an additional state licensure, so that's the LD.
Of course it does, because Texas. So is that licensed dietitian?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, what I'd like to do is frame the differentiation between a nutritionist and a dietitian.
Okay, that's a great question. We get that a lot. So a registered dietitian, we're basically clinical practitioners. We practice something called medical nutrition therapy. What that is it's cognitive behavioral therapy mixed with food science, nutrition sciences. And so you'll see a lot of dietitians in the clinical setting, but they are required to have a master's degree in science. We have to go through an accredited program and do 1,200 clinical hours. I think now it's down to 1,000 after COVID. But you have to get hands-on, usually unpaid practice, being a practitioner underneath someone else's license. And then you have to sit for your registration exam, which in years past has had anywhere from like a 40 to a 60% pass rate. So it is difficult to get the RD licensure. Nutritionist, there are a number of nutrition programs that can give you a nutritionist certificate, but that can range from a 8-hour class all the way to years of in-depth learning and functional nutrition. So nutritionist is kind of a broad term. You'd have to do your research to figure out if that person is how educated they are per se. It's not a regulated term. Anyone can go out there and slap nutritionist behind their name. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. You'd have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what education and background they have to see if that's somebody you would want to trust.
Got it. Not that there's anything wrong with being a dietitian, but it is not the level of schooling and education and, as you wonderfully pointed out, free work that goes into becoming an actual registered dietitian.
Right. I know a lot of great nutritionists, but I know a lot of bad people who use that name after their title that don't really practice great things.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I feel like there's probably a lot of nutritionists on TikTok that are in grocery stores telling people what they should and shouldn't eat.
Right. So
Okay.
it can be a slippery slope.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, let's jump into it. Let's start off with talking about how to feed people at events. The first question is, I'd love to discuss at a macro level how food impacts cognitive performance. And can we dig into, let's do it chronologically and start at the beginning of the day. And we know about people's circadian rhythm and we know when we're sharpest, and that's first thing in the morning. We had a human performance psychologist on earlier in the year, and she said, schedule your most intense sessions first thing. Oh, I know you because of her.
Yes.
Dr. Jess. Hi, Dr. Jess. That's right. She introduced us. She was talking about planning your agenda with sessions that focus on the highest cognitive load first thing in the morning. But I feel like the continental breakfast is very contrary to what we want to actually accomplish with our brains.
Right.
So what is your take on, let's say, continental breakfast, and then how we should design a menu for first thing in the morning?
Yeah, so the whole breakfast is the most important meal. There is some truth behind it, but for the most part, that was a marketing slogan brought to you by the cereal industry back in the day. And so there are a lot of research specifically with children eating and not eating breakfast, that test scores go up, and that's why they do lots of free breakfast programs at school. But for adults, you'll see kind of a mix of whether you have to eat right when you get up, can you wait a few hours? But as far as selection, that is probably more important than whether or not you're choosing to wait a little bit or eat first thing. The continental breakfast, you see lots of refined carbs. You see pancakes, cinnamon rolls, cereal.
All very delicious.
All delicious. All what you think you want when you're on vacation, right? But they might not be the best for focus, for memory, for alertness. And so choosing things that are a little bit higher in protein, choosing things that have more complex carbs like fibers and maybe a little bit of fats in them are going to give you more sustained energy versus an immediate sugar rush. I feel really good, and then 2 hours later, I'm crashing.
Okay, so digging into that, we want protein at breakfast. What does protein really do for the brain when you give it to it in the morning?
So for the brain, protein is really responsible for neurotransmitters. Fancy words.
So just your ability to think.
How rapidly you can fire those signals between what you're trying to accomplish in your brain.
If you haven't learned anything at this point in the episode, we could walk away and everyone would be happy. Okay, protein is responsible for fueling your neurotransmitters.
Yep, so if you're low on protein, your signaling to your body is going to be slow. It's not that it's not going to happen, but it's not going to happen at the most rapid rate we might want it to. So that's really the main purpose. There are some side purposes like you absorb medication better when you eat protein with them, right? That's why medications say take with meals. So if you're skipping breakfast and you're eating a lot of sugar and no protein, and then you take your meds, are you going to absorb all your medications? So people with thyroid issues or ADD or other behavioral things, that medication is pretty important to your daily functioning, energy levels, attention. Eating a high protein breakfast with your medication can really help.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that a little more later. So what is the flip side of that? What's the detriment to, I just want to dig in and really drive this point home, of serving only a continental breakfast to people and sugar and caffeine and that's it to people?
Typically, it's a false sense of energy. You spike high and you crash low. So it feels good in the short term. Your body does get that immediate hit of glucose and energy into the cells, but it's really short-lived if there's nothing to kind of pace us using it. It's going to shoot up and it's going to drop down quick.
Got it. So then you're going to pay attention for the first, what are we talking about time? Like an hour, 2 hours, or does it depend on the type of carb?
It depends on the type of carb, how complex it is, how much fiber is in it, what you're eating it with. If you have diabetes or another condition, insulin resistance, that's speeding it up or slowing it down. But usually you're talking like 1 to 2 hours.
Okay. So if you do continental breakfast at 8 a.m., basically sessions after 10 a.m., unless you're giving people more carbs and more sugar,
they're going to start feeling sleepy, distracted, when's lunch, looking at their watch, because their body's going to start sending hunger signals because their blood sugar's now low.
Right.
It spiked high, then it crashed low. And so now they're distracted because they're hungry and they're thinking about everything under the sun except for listening.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So if you have the 10:30 keynote spot, good luck based on the menu. But also I think that's the fine point I want to put on this is for planners to think about as you're working through your menu, what are you serving at that break that supports your breakfast and then lasts people until lunch? So let's before we move on into the rest of the day, what are some things that you would recommend serving, especially if to address different dietary restrictions?
Sure.
What are some great things that you could serve at breakfast that would help provide that more prolonged energy?
I would say definitely some healthy fats to help slow down any carbs that you do eat. So eggs are great, right? They're kind of all inclusive, but not everyone eats eggs. So you could do scrambled eggs and scrambled tofu. You can do like a Greek yogurt bowl with like dairy and non-dairy yogurt options, plus berries, nuts, seeds, things to kind of, again, slow down the digestion of carbs.
Well, what I think is interesting is people are like, oh, well, fruits are carbs.
Right.
But
classic.
But they're a different kind of carb, right?
Right. There's value added in fruit. It's not a sugar molecule, right? There are other things in that fruit. There are vitamins. There's fiber from the seeds and the outer wrapping of the fruit. And so when you eat refined grain, When we process it, we take the germ out, we take the bran out, and we just leave the sugary, right? The filling part. We take out those things that slow down the absorption. Versus fruit, it's all intact. Same with whole grains, they're all intact. And so we get kind of a value added there.
Got it. Yeah, I always heard when it came to like smoothies, always said, eat your fruit, but you can juice your vegetables. Which...
Yeah. It makes it go down easier, I guess.
Well, the reason being is because Jamba Juice does all these, and fruit smoothies, and all these people are like, oh, we're healthy. We offer freshly pressed juices. But a lot of those fresh pressed juices, you're losing all the fiber.
Right.
Right?
So while you are getting the vitamins, you are lacking the fiber. And the
fiber is what regulates your blood sugar.
Right. So if you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, or someone who has insulin resistance, spiking your blood sugar up, and then, oh, well, I drank a fruit smoothie, and then you crash, and now you're like hangry. Now you're reaching for maybe the not best choices because your body is sending this frantic signal of, I got to get something in now. And so, yeah, I don't love the fruit juices. I get it. They serve their purpose. It's packs a punch, but I like to use juicing for things that I'm not going to eat, right? I'm not going to ginger shots. Eating that much ginger is almost impossible, right? But eating an apple or eating some fruit, most people like that. So save the juice for the things that you're not going to be able to eat.
And obviously, I'm an advocate for, if you're going to serve smoothies, don't serve them without protein.
Yeah, big time.
Because there's only been one time, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I went to an event that happened to be in San Antonio, and shout out to La Cantera. They not only did they have protein available to add to their breakfast smoothies, they had the macros listed. And so I could tell how much protein was actually in it. And I said, oh, can I get a double scoop of protein?
Yeah.
So that I got 40 grams of protein for breakfast. And it was so simple.
Great option.
They had 3 different smoothies available. You could pick and choose. They had the blenders out, and they just dumped the scoop. It was wild to me. And that's still since the only time I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so beware of smoothies as well.
Yeah, they can be good, they can be bad. You got to use a little critical thinking to figure out, is there fiber, is there protein, is there fat?
Okay, perfect. So then going into the break, let's say someone made the choices where they went heavy carbs because they slept in or didn't get enough sleep, because we know lack of sleep impacts our food choices. Going into that break, maybe they've woke up a little bit and realized I made some poor decisions. What kind of things could we serve at the break to course correct to get people back on track?
I love like a trail mix, right? Again, you got to be careful because people have allergies, but if you do some kind of a trail mix, shelf stable, you can feature...
Or build your own.
You can feature local items, right? If you're up north in Michigan, maybe you have tart cherries. If you're in the South, maybe you have a kind of nut that they grow locally or a special brand of...
A pecan?
Yes, a pecan. So I think it's a cool way to kind of also spotlight local. You're in Chicago, you could do a little Garrett's popcorn, right? So you can kind of feature local cuisine, let people build their own, make it their own.
Probably sparingly on the popcorn, though, because it's usually covered in...
Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Agreed.
But you can do lots of fibrous things, lots of nuts. I would go more fat heavy on that snack. Not greasy, but I'm not doing like a straight cracker. Right. So a lot of people do protein bars, but that's not going to be an option that you would serve. Fruit skewers are fine. Maybe like a hummus and pita, hummus and veggies.
Well, so one of the things that I've actually had some success with is when I send out a bid for business in the RFP process, I have a disclaimer in there that says we reserve the right to bring in our own packaged snacks if your menu does not meet our nutritional needs. Because a lot of times the hotels, like protein bars aren't an option.
Right.
So then I will go to GNC or Vitamin Shop or whatever and pick up a bunch of protein bars and bring them in. But that would be a good option if it's something available.
That would be a great option because most people aren't getting enough protein in. And when we do eat protein, we want it spaced out. We don't want big clusters of protein. We want 4 to 5 times, probably like 20 to 30 grams each time. You want it spaced out. That's beneficial for muscle synthesis.
So, okay, well, that could lead me down a whole
other thing.
Yes, for all the fitness people that are watching. Okay, so we've talked about breakfast and break. Let's talk about something that I've heard about that I want to bring some clarification to, and I've spoke about. So for those of you who are hearing this for the first time, I had a software engineer I used to work with, and he told me that when he had a high protein breakfast, he didn't need his ADD meds. And I thought that was a wild story, so I immediately went to the internet to see if I could find something trustworthy. Yeah. I found Reddit first, which was interesting because there was plenty of ADD people on there who were talking about that themselves, that they were, it sounds bad to say self-medicating that way, but they were. They said, oh yeah, when I have a high protein breakfast, or my meds last longer. I did find some like mom blogs and that kinds of thing. I share this story, and then I had a woman at an event I spoke at messaged me on LinkedIn like 3 months later. And she said she started giving her 13-year-old child grilled chicken at breakfast, which I was like, of all the things, that seems like a random thing, but okay. And their grades went up.
Yeah.
So I'd really love to dig in to see, because 25% of the population has some form of ADD or ADHD. Think of that as 25% of your budget on an event budget.
Right.
That can be $250,000. Have you heard of any legitimate, peer-reviewed, double-blind kind of studies or anyone talking about this yet?
Not in adults. I'll say there's tons in children.
Oh,
tons
okay.
of research in children. I guess that's just where the grant money is. No one cares about the adults. But
maybe if they figure it out for kids, it will continue.
I'm thinking, and my master's kind of had a focus in functional, and I really learned to never discount people's lived experiences. So just because there might not be the gold standard research out yet, I think the collective of we've done it in children and it has outstanding results. I think that there could be a translation into adults. And so I'm kind of putting it as like a yellow flag. I think that it's very, very possible.
So is there conclusive studies with children?
Yeah. There's lots. I mean, that's basically a lot of the testing breakfasts that got funded by the government. That's how they proved that it was necessary, right? The kids can sit for 4 to 6 hours and take these standardized tests. Kids that can't sit still all day at school, but they give them a free breakfast, right? And it's not the gold standard of breakfast, but it is more protein than maybe they're getting at home or not eating at all. So there are studies where they do a high carb and a more protein-rich breakfast, and there are studies where they do no breakfast versus breakfast. Both of them have positive results.
So both breakfast, either high carb or high protein, are more positive than no breakfast.
Right.
Which is why the breakfast cereal industry was like, breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Booming.
And sugar.
Yeah.
But was there a difference between the high protein and the high sugar breakfast?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But again, the research is all in adolescence, so it's hard to say with adults, but I don't see why it wouldn't apply.
Yeah. Well, so if you know any of that research off the top of your head, can you share it with us?
Oh, the numbers elude me. But
okay, fair enough.
But there is plenty of research that's showing higher protein can lead to increased memory and like oral retention, where if you tell me something and I have to go back and repeat it 2 hours later, if I have a higher protein breakfast, I'm more accurate in what I'm repeating. So that long-term memory storage is becoming a little bit sharper.
That's significant.
Right. I can't say the numbers, but it was a p.05, so it was a significant difference.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, so that's another takeaway for us of what we are offering people for breakfast.
Right, it matters. It really does. If you are spending all this money to put on an event, why would you not want people to remember what was said?
I've been asking that for almost 2 years now. So it's one of those questions that I think people starting to think through.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges we face is the continued rising costs, food and things of that nature at the events. But I think to circle back on your point earlier, that some adults skip breakfast. We were doing our sound check here, and the producer asked, what did you have for breakfast? And I said, oh, I'm starving myself, but it's okay because I'm calling it intermittent fasting. But some people... Do you have any idea of what the average percentage of adults who skip breakfast is?
No, I don't know a number, but I will say the older you get, the more common it gets. Older people almost never eat a breakfast. They eat 1 to 2 meals a day. So, and I will say it is skewed, more men don't eat breakfast than women.
Interesting.
It's hormone-based.
Got it.
Our bodies don't do as well with fasting as men do. So men can get away with doing it, and they feel great and they have no side effects. And women, I wake up, I have a headache, I don't feel good, I got to eat something, got to take my medication, whatever. And so it is skewed more women will be more breakfast aware than men.
Got it. Oh, that reminds me to circle back real quick. You said medication. It made me think. Can you talk about food's impact on the efficacy of meds? Because we were talking about, he also said, or it makes my meds last longer for the ADD, ADHD. I guess I had my own moment there. We talked before about how and why that happens. Yeah. So can you break down for everyone else how food potentially prolongs the efficacy of meds?
Right. So if you take a medication on an empty stomach, it's first thing it's going to do is hit your stomach acid. Hopefully it breaks down to be absorbed, but the rate of absorption is going to depend on what else is in your stomach. So if you have protein in there, if you have fat in there, if you have carbs in there, all of that is going to affect the absorption and the breakdown, but the speed of it is really what people are kind of finding is making it last longer or not as long. So if you're eating with something, it's going to kind of diffuse a little bit slower into your blood, and so the effects can last a little bit longer at a nice level. You don't have this big spike of like, I'm uber focused, and then at about 1 o'clock, I can't do anything the rest of the day. And it's kind of funny because kids will have this phenomenon where they take their meds in the morning, they go to school, and at 3, they don't eat all day because their medication makes them not hungry. It messes with your hunger cues.
Right.
So they go to school all day, and at 3 o'clock they come home and eat their parents out of house and home. But they don't eat all day because they don't feel hungry. If you eat a breakfast, that effect is going to be a little bit lower and a little bit slower. So you're going to be able to eat a little bit more, and your meds are going to last longer. So maybe it's not wearing off till like 5 or 6.
Interesting. Okay. I think the trick is to eat before you take the meds, essentially.
You want it in there.
Right.
With the medication.
Does it matter what you eat that will prolong it? Like if you eat whole grains and protein versus just sugars?
There's 3 main components that you want to focus on.
Okay.
It's healthy fats, so like omega-3s, right?
Okay.
Those are beneficial. Those are slow digesting, those slow...
Eggs, nuts,
Yeah, eggs,
grains.
nuts, all of that.
Okay.
Anything, eggs, nuts, seeds, fish, but most people aren't eating fish for breakfast here.
Yeah, unless it's like lox.
Unless it's lox.
Yeah.
And then you got protein, so that's yogurt, eggs, cottage cheese, whatever you can get in these.
Tofu.
Any of it's going to be great. Protein's complex. You break it down, it gives you amino acids to make those neurotransmitters, so that's all beneficial. And then the sugar. If it's too high in sugar, that can be negatively affecting. So you do want some kind of carb, but usually you want something with some fiber. Again, slow digesting.
And that slower digestion then slows that uptake and prolongs
the effect of the medication.
That's,
it's not that it's making it work better or worse. It's just slowing it down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, but I think that's huge, especially when we run these agendas that start at 8 in the morning and go until 5 or 6 in the evening. We want people to be able to stay focused and pay attention the whole time.
All the sessions, not just the first couple.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how we encourage our attendees to make the right choices, because I think I don't want planners to think, well, I have to start stripping down my menu,
right,
and I'm going to have a mutiny on my hands if I start removing things altogether.
Right.
This is also a bit of a conversation about moderation per se, because we've all seen the donut walls and they're gorgeous and they're super fun. I'd love to see like a half donut wall where they're like just crescents so you don't have to have a whole donut. But how would you, or do you have any tips on how to position eating better at events for people when they're attendants without pulling things away from them?
Sure. Personal responsibility is something that's interesting, and it's kind of circling back that term of, do we want people to just take things away that are bad for us? Do we want them to police that, or do we want to police ourselves? The personal responsibility thing, that term came from the cigarette industry when they didn't want to put warnings on boxes because they said, well, people could choose to not, right? That's their choice. If they want to smoke or they want to do whatever, that was kind of, again, it was kind of an advertising slogan that got out of hand. And so if you're the planner, that's tricky water. You got to know your client. If the client is coming to you and asking for you to handle this, I want the healthiest menu possible, then I think that you have grounds to do what the client wants. I also think that if you're putting a lot of great options out there, people are just naturally going to make some good choices. Smoothies are appealing, right? An omelet with some kind of a nice vegetable mixed into it. It's colorful, it's attractive. And it's a lot more difficult to overeat when there's a lot of whole food options.
Because you feel full faster.
Right, you feel fuller faster. You're not spiking your sugar, you're not filling up on empty calories that aren't really like satiating you. And so if you have protein options and healthy, people are naturally going to probably not overeat as much.
Okay, that's good to know and makes sense. I think also I was just at an event where they actually had signage that said this menu was intentionally designed and it promoted how each of the foods, what was in each of the foods that helped your cognitive function and things of that nature.
I love an educational table tent.
Well, you have to label the food anyways for
Right.
allergens and all the obvious things. But I don't know if maybe there's an opportunity to create little images, because there's the images for gluten and all that stuff. And there's like a brain image and a heart image.
Yeah.
And because different foods are good for different
things.
Different things.
That's great. And I think people might buy in a little bit more if they feel like they're doing something good for themselves.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about in a brainstorming session was like at lunch, because we've talked about that already. You could probably do it at breakfast as well, is pushing your protein to the front of the buffet line and or your veggies, and push your starchy sides and stuff all the way to the end right before the desserts.
Yeah. That is a researched thing, actually. Whatever's at the front of the buffet line, people take more of. That's why when you go to like a pizza buffet, the salad is first. They want people to fill up on that salad, right? It's cheap. It's easy for them to put out versus the pizza. Or when you see rolls at the front of the line, that's strategic. They want people to take those. They know people are going to fill up on the first half more than the second half.
That's why they bring you bread at your
That's why they bring you bread
at your
or
table.
tortilla chips or whatever.
Yeah.
They want you to take that. So that's actually really smart. If you want people to take stuff, put it towards the front versus the end of the line.
Yeah. And you can just ask the hotel to do it. They may not like it because they know that you're going to go through it, but you can still ask for it. And I think one of the big things with food, though, is you can never really take things away.
Right.
Because then people feel like they're forced into something.
Right.
And I think that's one of the key things is food is a very personal thing. But I think that the key takeaways here is make it colorful, put your most beneficial foods to the front of the buffet line, but don't remove anything, just give people options.
Yeah. You want to value added, right? We're all about plus signs, not minus signs. So anywhere we can add value, that's what we want to do.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, we are at about lunchtime. I think one of the things that's also important to talk about when it comes to food is also hydration.
Big time.
Something that I read at the end of last year, my friend Liz Lathan, shout out. Hi, Liz. This is going to be kind of weird. She sent me a Nestle study.
Okay.
And it was all the food trends from 2024.
Okay.
And customizable hydration was apparently like the next big thing.
Water talk was big.
What water talk?
On TikTok, there was a section of TikTok where people were taking their big cups or big Stanleys or whatever, and it was like all these cool recipes. Like, I'm going to make orange dreamsicle, and they'll be like, I mixed this and this and this. Water talk was a thing. It was booming.
I missed water talk. Has it gone away now?
No, but there are a few like niche people who have kind of made it their thing.
I did see the water concierge guy, or the water som or something like that, and he was reviewing Liquid Death, Dasani, and he was digging into like what's in them, what's not in them, are they pH balanced, and blah blah blah. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's talk at a high level about the importance of hydration, because there's always water stations, but are people going to conferences actually staying hydrated when they're there?
No. And you also have to account for not just the time they're sitting in the chair. You got to account that they're driving, flying, sleeping in hotel rooms, right? You get dehydrated doing all of that stuff. And then you don't know when the next bathroom break is going to be. So maybe you're nervous to chug a bunch of water because when am I going to go to the bathroom? As little as like a 1% to 2% change in body weight can have cognitive effects, which is very, very little when you're thinking about all of the things that go into a multi-day event, right? And so I personally don't drink a lot when I travel because I'm nervous I'm going to have to stop. And so I'm dehydrating myself intentionally, not thinking about the cognitive consequences. So any way that you can entice people, I love like a nice water like infusion, right? Putting fruits, putting things in that add color, flavor, different choices. So then maybe, I'll try this one, I'll try that one. It can kind of encourage people, but also making sure you're scheduling breaks for people to get up and fill up their waters, get up and go to the bathroom, because people get a lot of nerves about that.
So I'd love to talk, because you said it a couple times, about the impact of dehydration and cognitive function. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that and what happens as we get more and more dehydrated?
Yeah.
Especially because Orlando and Vegas are two of the biggest conference cities.
Yep.
And Vegas is obviously very dry. Mm-hmm. Orlando is the opposite of that, but it means you're sweating all the time.
Yeah.
So both cities are going to dehydrate you, just
Right.
in different approaches. I'd love to learn more about what happens to your ability to think and learn and all that stuff when you get dehydrated.
Yeah, so when you are dehydrated, your blood volume is decreasing. That's that feeling of thirst, the feeling of kind of dizziness, lightheadedness. When your blood volume decreases, your body isn't able to pump as much around as well, as fast to get to everything. So your perfusion, how much blood is getting to your brain, to your stomach, to your kidneys, to anything that's sending signals, hormones, memory retention, all of that's decreased because the blood is quite literally not pumping through as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So this is not at all accurate, and I can't wait for the comments. It's almost like you're thickening your blood to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's like honey versus water, right? It's thick, it's hard to pump through. It's not reaching the ends before it has to come back. It might only go 50, 75% of the way.
Which then you're not getting as much oxygen to as many things.
All of that, yes. Oxygen, glucose, protein, neurotransmitters, all of that's going to get decreased, and how much is actually reaching the parts that need it.
So going back to enticing people to drink more water, especially when we do like open bar, mm-hmm. which is notorious. What kind of things have you seen? Have you seen any setups that have actually leaned into this at anything you've gone to? Because I have a feeling that even though this is what you do, mm-hmm. you go to conferences for people that do what you do, and they run the conferences the same way every other conference is run, and nobody's thinking about this kind of stuff.
Right.
So, but just in case, have you seen anything that was really cool?
I've seen a lot of mocktails. I've seen a lot of infusions in tea versus like coffee and things that are more dehydrating theoretically. I've even seen places, if it's more of like a sporty event, that they do like electrolyte drinks. And people seem to really like that. I mean, it's a good
Is it because there's flavor, probably?
There's flavor. People hate plain water. I don't know a lot of people that just love plain water all day, every day. So any way that you can add color or flavor, people are more likely to talk about it, try it, get their friends. Ooh, I tried this one. It was good. Oh, let me go fill up mine. So I love to add some kind of flavor.
I'm picking up on the additional thing that you said of people talking to each other.
Yeah.
I took the Nestle study, mm-hmm. and I took that section and I asked ChatGPT to like give me ideas. Yeah. And one of the things it broke down was creating a build your own hydration station.
That's fun.
Where you have still and sparkling, because we know there are people that are fanatical about bubbles.
Yeah.
There are other people that think that's disgusting. And then you have a series of things and bowls and whatnot where there's lemons and limes and mint and cucumber and all these different things that you can add to your water so that you can kind of create your own. Or I guess with that other clause, you could bring in your own hydration packets as well.
Sure.
Are a lot of those things hype? Or is there any
No, there's good science behind it. Really, the basis of all of those hydration drinks is ORS, oral rehydration solution, which is
what is that?
old technology that was originally used in foreign countries that dysentery is a really big problem where it's deadly. And so it's a special mix of water, like certain ratios, water, salt, sugar. Really simple ingredients. And when you drink it, the cellular uptake is really rapid. It can hydrate you in as little as 5 minutes versus plain water can take a lot longer to get into your system. So when you're in a life or death situation, that ratio hits the transmitters right to get the fastest absorption of water into your blood.
Got
So
it.
a lot of Gatorade and Powerade and Liquid IV and all of those are kind of a play on that foundation.
Is there any, I'm not one, I always talk about promoting practice over product, but the wellness industry is at something like $6.3 trillion for a market cap, but that includes the supplements industry. And we know there's a lot of people and a lot of supplements out there that are just making outlandish, wild claims about what their stuff does.
Yeah.
Is there any hydration ones that are doing it really well and are sticking to the science?
I mean, my favorite's Gatorade and Powerade.
Okay.
Full sugar Gatorade and Powerade, because it's made the way it's supposed to be made. Then you start getting into some that are a little bit more salty, a little bit higher in potassium. That would be so case by case that it's hard
Got it.
to say, but they do help.
So then does the G2, which is the sugar-free Gatorade, is that not
Again,
as
you're lacking
beneficial?
one of the components. And so it's not helping, it's not hurting you, but it's not helping you, I guess, as rapidly. So if it's not a life or death situation,
It's probably
drinking a
fine.
G2 is probably fine.
Got it.
But the plain old, age-old stuff seems to work just fine.
I think there's a lot of people, especially people who are trying to watch their weight and whatnot, we tend to be afraid of sugar.
Yeah.
Because it's in so many foods, right?
Added sugar.
Well, yes, added sugar, high fructose corn syrup,
Yeah.
etc. Because the original Gatorade was actually a scientifically worked formula by a coach in
Right.
Florida.
Right.
Yeah, for the Florida Gators. But I don't think any of us are usually in a life or death situation when it comes to...
And most of us aren't athletes out there doing the physical demands that is kind of using the carbs that are in the Gatorade.
Right.
And so I'm not a big fan of people drinking Gatorade and sitting on the couch, right? That's not what it's intended for. It's intended for you're dehydrated, you're active, you're moving, you need
If you're on a
that.
bike doing a 100-mile bike ride, it's okay.
Right.
That's why you see those Tour de France guys drinking Cokes.
Housing it.
Yeah.
They do all the things.
Well, but because they can.
Right,
Because
they're
also-
using that energy. When we're sitting in a conference, I don't know that there's the physical demand to be drinking 42 grams of carbs. I'd
Right.
rather spend my carbs eating something delicious. So I'm probably
Yeah.
not doing a full sugar Gatorade at a conference, but if I'm on the plane or something where I feel like I just am not getting enough in no matter what I do, you could do that. But you could do a sugar-free.
But I think you could also use those fruits, right? You could use lemons and limes to
Yeah.
help you get that sugar element. So if we did a hydration bar, should there be a salt component to it? Or do you think people wouldn't know what to do with that?
I don't think people would know what to do with it. I don't
Yeah.
think they would need it. And they're probably getting enough salt from their food.
Probably, especially at a conference.
Unless you're really sweating, you're in Florida and you're like huffing it to walk to the conference. But no, I don't think you need salt. I
Yeah.
think just getting people to drink more water would suffice. In any fashion that you can get it in them.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so we're midday. I'd probably offer that hydration at the first break
Yeah.
to start with, because we know people are going to drink their coffee
In the morning.
and or tea. Going into that first break, offer the hydration station. Going into lunch. Now, Jess and I have talked ad nauseum about the postprandial dip
Yeah.
after lunch,
Oh, the worst.
the slump. And there's been some back and forth about how lunch can impact it if you're serving people lasagna versus serving people salad or that kind of thing. So I'd love to talk about that, how to plan a great lunch that will fortify people but won't make them necessarily any sleepier than they inherently will be. Or is that a myth?
No, that's not a myth. It's really simple when you think about it. Rest and digest versus fight or flight, right? If we're focusing, we're taking notes, we should be in a little bit of a heightened awareness to focus and store that as best as possible. When we're eating lunch, what I really hate is like working lunches or lunches where there's loud music and slides and raffles and lots of stuff going on, because people are never getting in that rest and digest phase. Overeating can cause a drowsiness because your body just got hit with a massive amount of food it has to digest, and it starts to shut things down to be able to process that food that you just ate. So yeah, lighter things, the correct portions, all of that plays a role, but trying to promote a mindful space to eat lunch is really important. And I see that dropped a lot at events. It's a very stressful environment. You're like rushed and it's loud and you're trying to do 50 other things in the 30-minute hour lunch that you have. And so I think that gets people into a lot of trouble.
Do you think that's long enough? Or should our lunches be like a 90-minute?
I mean, I think an hour is probably okay. 90 minutes just seems like a large chunk where people would start to be sitting around not doing anything, and you don't want that necessarily either. So I think an hour is good, but I think you want to kind of let people really kind of stop the chaos for an hour if you can before ramping it back up.
Let them enjoy that time so that they can rest and digest before.
Yes.
You talked about simpler foods, and I'd love to dig into that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it as obvious as don't give people lasagna and pasta and stick with protein and unfried things?
Yeah, so the fried things is really just, it's really high in omega-6s, it's really heavy, it's really slow digesting. So again, it's the same principles as the breakfast. You want a lot of protein, you want complex carbohydrates. So all of that has to do with the insulin and the blood glucose spiking and crashing out. And then you want some fats, but you want more healthy fats. Those heavy fats can put people into a hazy trance.
Got it. Okay, so what you feed people at lunch really does matter.
Yeah.
As to how they're
It is going to affect that 2 to 3 o'clock wall that people are hitting. Because again, what's happening is they're dipping too low. Their blood sugar is now low. And so their body starts to tell them, I either need to take a nap or I need to eat something sugary.
Right.
So people start reaching for the candy bars and the Coca-Cola at 3 o'clock to try and pick their blood sugar up to get through till dinner.
Yeah. Now, professionally, you work in a hospital, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I'd love to talk about is food allergies and belonging, because I think food is personal.
Yeah.
What's the impact on people when we're dismissive, or like there's some people who are like gluten allergies are a made up thing, they'll be fine? What's the real impact on people when we aren't thoughtful about that kind of thing?
I mean, I think it can really make or break a negative experience. If you feel unseen, unheard at an event, you don't leave that event wanting to go back. You don't leave a rave review. Word of mouth is very powerful. So you're going to other people saying, I had a terrible time at that event, XYZ happened. Not to mention allergies can be life or death. And yes, there are preferences, but there are medical allergies. And I think sometimes people do write off some of the gluten or dairy. Oh, it's whatever. It is not whatever. And if someone says, I have an allergy to that, we need to respect that and try to make it as easy for them and not necessarily single them out either, right? Because we can be accommodating, but we can also put people very far away from their group. Bringing out completely separately wrapped meals that are a totally different item than what everyone else is eating. That's accommodating, but that's not really a great experience. So I always try and mimic the menu as close as possible. So if it's a breaded chicken, I try and serve, if it's gluten, a grilled chicken, right? I'm not going to turn around and serve a turkey sandwich and say, oh, well, on gluten-free bread, here you go. Everyone else is eating X, Y, and Z. So trying to mimic the menu or have options already out that naturally accommodate that is the best thing to do.
Yeah, because I'm guessing you don't work in situations where people have that personal choice.
I mean, people say they're allergic to a lot of things, and we just have to take that word for it.
Fair enough.
And there are a list of things that you can be truly anaphylactically allergic to. Most of them are protein reactions. And so some people say, I'm allergic to vitamin D. I'm like, you're not allergic to vitamin D. You just don't want to take vitamin D, or you don't like fish, so you say I'm allergic to vitamin D.
Right.
So, but we have to respect that. Or cilantro, right? You just don't like cilantro, but if they say I'm allergic to it, although I know there is no allergy to cilantro, really, a true G reaction, we have to respect that.
Is there, I'm guessing Tracy probably has this list, but is there a list somewhere on a website of like what the medical allergens, the standard list of medical allergens are?
Yeah, and I think they just added one, but she's the expert, man. She is on it. So, but your typical ones are like dairy, eggs,
tree nuts,
soy. So what's really happening is you create an antibody to the protein in those foods.
Got it. Well, after this, we'll follow up, and hopefully we can put the link to that in the comment or in the description so that people can use it as a resource when they're building out their reg page. And whatnot.
But trends is also important, right? We saw a huge increase in people who are wanting gluten-free options or vegetarian options. The plant-based is growing, it feels like, a little bit. So just having things that are already gluten-free, already vegetarian out can really help.
Well, the reason I was asking you about if you're ever in situations where people have choice is because it seems like when you put out, you try to mimic the menu, right? And you have the same thing, one version gluten-free, the other version not gluten-free, and everybody takes the gluten-free one. And you're like,
that's not for you.
right.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if you had any experience dealing with that, or you put out the vegan thing and people are like, oh, I'm just going to eat that because it's supposedly more healthy.
Right. I think a good way to do that is if you have people with allergens, I usually would recommend like not being like allergy people front of the line, but you can maybe have a code, the system, a color. If you have a green sticker on your badge, come and go through the line first. That way they're getting their options and then it's a free for all. If people want gluten-free bread, they can have it, but trying to get the people with the allergies the item first.
Are people just kind of dumb animals in the sense of it's gluten-free, so it must be healthier for me?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. It's
okay.
Trendy, it's attractive, it's different, it's special.
And for those of us who don't know exactly what the difference is between regular and gluten-free, can you break that down for us? So that people understand it's not necessarily, quote, healthier.
Right.
If I have the gluten-free brownie versus the regular brownie, I'm still having a brownie.
Correct. So the gluten is just the protein that comes from processing the bread.
So even worse, it's like less healthy for you.
Less protein usually, higher sugar usually. And so yeah, it is. And some foods are naturally gluten-free, right?
Like eggs.
Like eggs. Eggs are gluten-free. So if some people slap a gluten-free label on their eggs, I hope there's no I hope there's no gluten in that. That's a big advertising thing. People putting labels on things that are already naturally not in there. But no, it is not any healthier. If anything, it's usually lower in protein.
What about plant-based? Because I know there was like the Impossible Burger, and like when they first came out, there was like 24 grams of saturated fat in them.
Yeah. Because when they're taking that stuff out, they have to put something else in its place. The low-fat trend. We took fat out of everything, and what did we have to put in to make it taste good? Sugar. So taking things out is usually means something else is added back in that you probably don't need in excess.
Yeah. And I think it depends on when you ask people what they're allergic to. I always do an other section, which my favorite response I ever got was, I'm not allergic to it, but I require white truffle oil on everything. And I was like, that's okay, good for you. That's a bold choice. But I think it also, you can make people feel really alienated and isolated. And I had an event where I unfortunately, it was my first in-person event back after the pandemic. And it was only a group of like 40 of us. But we had two people who, when we went to lunch, I saw them leaving the venue. And I stopped them. I said, hey, is everything all right? And they said, oh, there's nothing for us to eat.
Yeah.
And I had not felt more guilt in that moment. Because, yeah, like you said before, I knew those people were going to go find their food, talk trash the entire time.
Yeah.
Come back, see everyone. And it was like our marketing team that they weren't there to break bread with.
Yeah.
And then come back and everyone's like, oh, where were you guys during lunch? And then they get to tell everyone, oh, Dave forgot to plan for the food we need. It was so embarrassing. But I think it's really important that we think through that and how we ensure people belong with our food choices. What is it about eating that makes it so communal, and like, why is that so important to us?
Food is culture. I mean, it really is around the globe. You look, everybody has to eat. So that's point number one. But around the world, there is so much tradition and things that get passed down around the table and cooking. And so food is culture, and to be excluded from the culture is really painful feeling. And so I think it's important to, break bread. I mean, that goes back to biblical times, right? People sat around the table and told stories and fellowshipped and did all those things. So it's an important human aspect to diet, right? It's more than just calories. It's more than just carbs, fats, and proteins. It is community. It is fellowship. It is sharing of thoughts and knowledge. I mean, a lot gets passed around the table.
Yeah. Well, unless you're a bodybuilder, and then it's only carbs, fat, and protein.
Then it's just carbs, fat, and protein.
Okay, so we've got through lunch. We've helped people work through it. We're talking about there's always an afternoon break. So we're on the other side, or depending on if they're a night owl or whatnot, we're dealing with that other backside of the postprandial dip. What kind of things should we ensure that we're having at our PM breaks to make sure that we keep people going for a couple more hours?
Usually at a PM break, I would say, because the time between lunch and dinner is usually a little bit longer than the time between breakfast and lunch being served, I definitely like to have some kind of carbohydrate, whether that be fruit, granola, something with a little bit of carbs in it, to give people that slight blood sugar boost to get through till dinner. We don't want a bunch of hangry people walking around. So in the morning, I think you can go a little bit lower carb. It's not as important. But in the afternoon, you do want something. That's a great time to serve fruit or a charcuterie board with some crackers or bread or something on it.
Well, as long as it's balanced, right?
Right. But as long as there's pita bread, some pretzels, those would be good times to have those higher carb items out.
Okay,
versus
perfect.
Earlier.
Yeah. And then we go into dinner, and then obviously more focus on hydration still.
Yeah.
And then we go into dinner. Can we talk about timing also of dinner and sleep? Because I'm sure there's some connectivity between when you eat versus when you go to sleep and the time window before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what's kind of an ideal dinner to set you up for a good night's sleep? We had a sleep doctor on, and she talked about that when you sleep, it's when you convert your short-term memory into long-term memory.
Yeah.
It's when your brain resets and gives you the opportunity to learn new things the next day. So, yeah, what do we feed people for a good night's sleep at dinner?
I would say timing is important. You don't want to feed them, I would say, 2 hours or smaller between bedtime and dinner. So you don't want a super late dinner, or you don't want it too late that you think people would be going to bed right after, if possible. But dinner is a great time to do your heavier, higher fat meal, right? All day, we don't want things too heavy.
That's like the opposite of Slim Fast.
Yeah, basically. So you can do your heavier options like your red meat or your lasagna. Something
red meat's going to kill you. I saw it on TikTok.
Must be true. But you can do something higher in fat because people, we want them to be sleepy, right? And we're really effective digesters at night. And so it's okay to have a little bit heavier meal because we don't need a carb spike before bed, right? So I usually recommend that's the time to do your heavier meal. If there are items that the client is requesting or popular items that you want to include, but you just heard that you shouldn't be doing it for lunch maybe, that's the time to do those things. But again, you're in rest and digest. So you're really effective at breaking down those long chains of fat into short chains into usable chains. And so that's typically what I push in the evening.
Well, because you're going into essentially a fasted state at that point, right?
All night long, you're going to be breaking down that food and hopefully using it, pulling things out of storage, gluconeogenesis as needed to get you through the night.
Oh, yeah, gluconeogenesis. That's what I was going to say.
I knew it.
And what exactly does that mean?
That means making glucose from things that aren't glucose. So you can make glucose from fats, you can make glucose from proteins, you can make glucose from muscle, anything that's broken down to make glucose. Your body runs on glucose.
Right. So personal ask, what's an ideal dinner to, or is there a version that sets you up for fat-targeted gluconeogenesis?
I would say probably lower carb or more complex carbs. So I would do beans or something like that where it's not such a spike to the system. Force your system to break down some of those other things you just ate.
That's kind of a personal ask. I'm trying to shed a few pounds.
That's
so,
all right.
You know. But I only want to lose the body fat.
But everyone's a little different because if you are like diabetic or pre-diabetic, you might need a little bit more carbs at night, or else you wake up in the middle of the night with like the shakes. If you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh, I feel, it physically wakes them up. And so that would be a sign that that person might need
Got it.
a little bit higher carbohydrates or a snack, a peanut butter sandwich before bed or something just to give them a little extra push.
Got it. And then you said essentially dinner should be done, you said 2 hours before bed?
Yeah, no more than, or no closer than 2 hours.
Okay.
So
if you're doing an 8 o'clock dinner,
it's pushing it.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough. And obviously we love desserts at dinner.
Yes. That's probably the best time to do it. If I had to pick a time to do a dessert, that would be the time.
What about after a workout? Is that a better time?
That would be a better time because you probably put it right back in your muscle that you just opened up those gates. So
fair enough. Okay.
Who's using it?
Do a workout, have a piece of cake.
Check.
Protein cake.
Yeah.
Okay. So we gave people dinner. I'm going to touch a little bit on alcohol.
Yeah.
Because we love to do open bar and wine and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on lots of alcohol at dinner?
If you have something the next morning, that's probably not the best idea. Even once your BAC returns to normal, the brain fog and the other neurological effects can last 12 to 24 hours. That's after you return to normal, which, depending on how hard you go, could not be until the next day. So if you're serving alcohol or open bar at an event and turning around and asking people to focus on an 8 and 9 a.m. session, that's going to probably not be the most retained information.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that Dr. Wells shared was that your alcohol cutoff should be approximately like 3 hours before bed. Mm-hmm. And I think she was like, it's not that you shouldn't drink, it's that be careful how much you have. I think something we as event professionals need to think about is that the drink ticket is our best friend.
Yeah.
Because it not only regulates our participants' intake, but it also regulates our budget.
Yeah.
Because then we can control how much is actually being spent on those beverages, and then anything after that is their poor choices at a cash bar.
Right. So that's a good compromise, I think, is to do a drink ticket where you can be a little bit more in control of.
Yeah. Well, and then you're encouraging, you're not cutting people off.
Right.
You're just really encouraging better behavior than doing anything else. Okay, we're just coming into time here, so I would love to wrap up with, are there any new fun science studies, facts that you'd like to share that we may not be thinking about at the moment?
For events.
Well, for food and cognitive function and how it impacts events and just in general, is there any new food science? Because we're not going to get into politics and what's going on, but like there is a lot swirling around like red dye number 5 and all these things about, oh, this is illegal here and that's legal there and those kinds of things. So are there any new studies coming out around food to help us make better decisions?
I think that there is a spiked interest in nutrition right now with all of the changes that are going on. And I love that, right? Because people are kind of wanting to be a little bit more informed. Problem is there's so much disinformation that's so readily available. So there are studies on food dyes. Other countries limit food dyes. Again, a lot of the studies are in children. So that's the other thing. There aren't studies in adults. There are studies in the amount that adults are intaking, but not necessarily the direct effects of the food dyes. I would encourage people to not get sucked into that. I mean, we're stepping over boulders to pick up pebbles, right? We're focusing on food dyes, but we're negating the fact that we're overeating and we're not moving. So we're focusing on a really small seed oils, right? A really small problem.
Seed oils.
But not focusing on the big problem of you're eating 1 serving of fruits and vegetables a day. But you got to focus on that pebble, that shiny pebble. So I think just focusing on the really broad things. Are we drinking water? Are we moving our body? Are you eating fruits and vegetables? Those things are going to have a much larger impact on your health than anything that should be a minute part of your diet anyway.
I love the term stepping over boulders to pick up pebbles. Did you learn that from someone?
I think I heard it on Nick Bare's podcast.
Okay, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but it is. We want to hyper fixate on it like a small ingredient in a food, but food dyes. If you're eating meat and grains and fruits and vegetables, if you eat 1 packet of Skittles, the effect that food dye is going to have on you is so small. So don't stress about
Skittles got
anything
demonized for a hot, so they're like, Skittles is going to give you cancer.
I mean, how much Skittles are you eating should be the question and not the food dye.
Right, and it's like the Coke Zeros and the zero sugar alternatives that they've come up with about, and everyone's like, oh, well, it's saccharin is going to kill you and blah, blah, blah. And when the amount you need
60 Diet Cokes every day for the next 10 years. That would be like the amount that you need. It's absurd.
Yeah.
And people drink a lot, don't get me wrong.
And if you're drinking that, you have bigger issues to deal with first.
Bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
So I think people are just hyper fixating on these minute problems and not addressing the larger problems at hand.
Because it gets views and likes and
It's trendy
shares.
and makes money. Sell your product.
Any guidance for people when they see something like that, how to discern if it's shenanigans and gaslighting versus legitimate science?
It's a good point. I mean, as complex as we like to get in the nutrition realm, it's really simple. Plants, protein, polysaccharides. So plants, fruits and vegetables.
Right.
Protein, that can be meat or not meat choices, however you want to get that in, but that is important at all ages of the life cycle. And then polysaccharides, complex carbs. So that's whole grains. If you can hit the 3 Ps, you're probably doing good. If you're focusing out of that, you better have the best diet I've ever seen in my whole life.
How much protein is, because like there's the food pyramid that says you're supposed to eat on the back, on the label, it's recommended 50 grams a day. And then there's your fitness people who are like a gram a day, maybe a gram and a half a day. Where's the happy medium? Is 50 enough for most people?
I would say 50 is not enough for most people, and especially not if you are active, and that can just be yoga, walking, whatever. 50 is not going to be enough to maintain muscle mass. You are going to burn muscle. So a good rule of thumb is 20 to 30 grams 4 to 5 times a day. That fits most people. Some people are at the 20 range. Some people are at the higher 30 range. But if you're doing that 4 to 5 times a day, you're going to meet your needs.
Yeah. Okay. So that's anywhere from 80 to 150 grams.
Yeah.
Okay. I tend to go by I aim for 1 gram per pound.
Yeah, there's no benefit to doing over that. That is like the top researched limit.
Is 1 gram per pound?
Well, it's 2 per kilogram, but it's about 1 per pound. Up until that point, if you go over that, the cost of the protein really outweighs the benefit. It's not that it's poisoning you, but you're really not going to see any added muscle growth by going over that. So I usually tell people don't go over that. You don't need it.
It's just not necessary.
It's not necessary. It's hard to get that much protein in. It's expensive to get that much protein in. So
protein is expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, all of you, for joining. If you have any additional questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section, and we're going to tag Jessie in the episode so that you're welcome to reach out directly if you have any follow-up questions. We will see you next month on the next episode of Return on Wellness. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for joining Return on Wellness. For more information on Caesars Entertainment's offerings, please scan the QR code. Make sure to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is out.